I knew something was off the moment Isaac triple-checked his out-of-office plan like he was prepping for nuclear winter instead of Cabo. The man color-coded a handover document like it was a damn Bible. 8 tabs, 3 backup contacts, and a section titled Contingency Escalations, if I'm dead. I joked he should leave instructions for CPR too, and he just stared at me and said, they'd still ask me to approve the ventilator settings. Isaac Roman wasn't just a compliance officer. He was the spine of Altium Core, the kind of guy you never saw lose his cool, never heard raise his voice, but somehow he made execs nervous with a single raised eyebrow. He wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, wasn't even promoted past his original title. But you'd be a fool not to notice the way HR never finalized anything without his eyes on it first. And yet, when he told them he needed a break, just 2 weeks after 4 years of drowning in audits, legal fires, and VP meltdowns, he was met with the usual passive-aggressive parade. Of course, Isaac. You deserve it. We'll be fine. They said it the way you tell a pilot. Don't worry. The passengers can fly the plane. That morning, while the rest of us were laughing about some awful meme in Slack, Isaac was zipping up a beige duffel and labeling it non-negotiable peace. I asked where he was headed. He smiled that faint, tired smirk of his and said, somewhere without cell service or bad leadership. Before logging out, he dropped an email to HR, just a line, dry and direct. Reminder that, as per policy 5.3.1, vacation time is protected and may not be interrupted unless in written mutual agreement. He didn't CC anyone, didn't need to. That clause? He'd written it. Hey, before I go on, if you're still listening, do me a favor. Tap that subscribe button and like the video. It keeps stories like this alive. And it really helps the team keep digging up the kind of corporate chaos they don't want you to hear about. Back to Isaac. You could tell this wasn't his first time expecting fallout. He left a folder on his encrypted drive named Exit Protocol, and knowing him, that wasn't a metaphor. He'd covered every base, set every trap. He didn't trust them not to mess with him, but he also didn't fear it. That's the difference. When he finally shut his laptop and stepped out into the parking lot, he didn't look back, didn't hug anyone, just walked out like a ghost, clocking out of purgatory. And still, I could feel it in my gut. They'd come for him anyway. They always do. 3 days into his first real vacation in 4 years, Isaac was standing barefoot on a rocky trail in Big Sur, watching fog roll in like a slow ambush when his phone buzzed. Just one line from HR. Hey, just need a few things, quick revisions on the Q4 templates. Be a team player. He stared at it like it was written in crayon. No hope you're well, no apology for the intrusion. Just that fake cheer, weaponized corporate tone HR thinks makes exploitation sound like community service. And that emoji? I swear it must be in the Geneva Convention by now. He didn't even hesitate, just stood there, middle of nowhere, mist curling around his boots, and typed back, per policy, I am currently on protected leave. I do not consent to perform work tasks at this time. Full stop. No wiggle room. That was Isaac. Precise, professional, but unshakable. He knew the rules better than anyone. Hell, he wrote half of them. 15 minutes later, his phone buzzed again. Your position is terminated effective immediately. Cause, non-compliance, severance revoked. Just like that. No call, no meeting, no conversation, just a cold, digital execution on company letterhead, like swatting a mosquito with a grenade. I remember he took a photo of the screen, like he didn't trust the email to still exist later. That was his instinct, to preserve evidence first, breathe later. I didn't find out until hours after. He didn't tell anyone. Just forwarded the vacation approval chain to his personal email with a subject line that read, covering my ass. And in the body, one word. Noted. I couldn't believe it. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake, some rogue intern, a glitch in the system. But Isaac didn't even look shocked. He just stared at the ocean, cracked his knuckles, and muttered, "Took them long enough." That's when it clicked for me. This wasn't some HR blunder. This was calculated, deliberate. They waited until he was 3 days into leave so they could call it abandonment and duck severance. They probably thought he'd be too far off grid or too stunned to fight back. They didn't know about Clause 7D. They didn't remember who wrote it, but Isaac did. And this? This wasn't him getting screwed. This was them stepping into a minefield he buried years ago, smiling like they owned the place. 3 years ago, that boardroom looked like a war zone in a startup documentary. Half-eaten granola bars, dead laptops, cold coffee that had been nuked 4 times. The founders were sweating through their shirts, arguing over burn rates and investor timelines. HR looked like they were one Excel error away from crying. Legal was nowhere to be found. Too junior, too slow, too busy covering their own asses. Altium Core was scaling aggressively, which is Silicon Valley code for we're setting everything on fire and hoping the wind blows in our favor. They had hired 30 new staff in under 2 months, but nobody had written a single standardized contract. Every offer letter was a Frankenstein monster of previous templates, Slack messages, and legalese stolen from someone's cousin's startup. That's when Isaac stepped in. Burned out, underpaid, and sitting on a compliance backlog that looked like a tax audit from hell, he offered to just write them up. No fuss, no glory. Oh, just Isaac in his gray hoodie and tired eyes, typing late into the night while someone in marketing screamed about fonts 2 doors down. He built the onboarding templates from scratch, structured every clause like a surgical instrument. Performance metrics, arbitration rules, severance models, everything. He was the rule guy. Quiet, precise, and too useful to question. Legal skimmed what he wrote, nodded, and moved on. Nobody thought the compliance officer would lace anything with poison. That's the funny thing about being invisible in a room. You can do damn near anything if you keep your voice calm and your face blank. Clause 7D was only 19 words long, buried near the bottom, where even interns stopped reading. Termination during protected leave triggers maximum severance multiplier plus legal indemnity. No bold text, no underline, no warning, just a fuse. He'd written it half out of spite, half out of grim humor. He knew how companies like Altium Core moved, fast and careless, the kind that would chew up their own founders if it shaved 5 points off expenses. He never expected to use it. Honestly, he hoped he wouldn't. But some nights, when the lights flickered and his inbox filled with yet another 3 a.m. Urgent ask. He'd glance at the clause and feel a strange kind of comfort. A little insurance policy, a loaded shell in a locked drawer, a final word, written when no one was listening. And now they just pulled the trigger. Isaac didn't slam anything, didn't curse, didn't call a single soul. The moment that termination email hit, he closed his laptop like it was just another tab in a browser he was done with. He wiped the company apps from his phone. Slack, Outlook, 2-factor, all of it gone in under a minute. Even disabled the biometric access he helped implement. That was the irony. Half the systems that had just exiled him were built off his templates. Then he turned to his home office, that little bunker of laminated checklists and wire-bound legal pads, and began the reset. He moved slow, intentionally, pulled files, shredded nothing. He didn't need to erase anything. He already had the receipts archived and backed up on a clean drive labeled "in case of stupidity." The desk stayed the same. The chair stayed swiveled. He left the calendar untouched, still showing vacation protected in red ink on every day. The only thing he changed was a single text, sent at 9:17 p.m. after brushing his teeth and pouring a whiskey he didn't bother to sip. To D. Keating, Associate Legal Counsel. You might want to read Clause 7D of my agreement. That was it. No follow-up, no explanation, no threat. Just a quiet tap of the first domino. Keating didn't respond. Not that night. But at 11:03 p.m., Isaac's phone lit up with a call from an unknown number linked to a board member. He let it ring. Let it hit voicemail. And when it buzzed again, he turned the phone face down and walked to the balcony, where the moon was pulling the tide like clockwork. Predictable. Unbothered. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't a tantrum. He wasn't some tech martyr looking for vindication. It was just a policy, enforced exactly as written. They broke the rules. He followed them. Simple math. In the quiet, he finally sipped his whiskey, then opened a worn paperback, Vonnegut, I think, and started reading. Not because he was relaxed, not because he was detached, but because after years of being the guy who covered everyone else's mistakes, who plugged every leak and took every fall, he'd finally let one balloon drift off without chasing it. and the wind was already changing. The executive sync started like any other, camera angles too low, half the team still muted, and the CFO's intern trying to wrangle a 43-tab spreadsheet like his career depended on it, which it probably did. But 10 minutes in, the room shifted. Legal joined uninvited. That never happened. Donna, the general counsel, was already mid-scroll when she unmuted. No pleasantries, no warm-up, just the rustle of paper and the kind of silence that feels like a dropped knife. Clause 7D, she said, voice flat. Isaac Roman's agreement. I'll read it aloud so there's no confusion. And then she did. If severance is denied due to retaliatory termination during protected leave, maximum statutory payout and a public compliance disclosure trigger apply automatically. Silence. HR blinked hard as if the words were in another language. The intern dropped a printout. Paper fluttered off screen. The CEO, mid-sip of whatever oat milk nonsense he drinks, stopped cold, coffee hovering halfway to his mouth like a paused GIF. One of the VPs leaned in toward their screen, squinting like they could unsee it if they read slower. Wait, someone muttered. What the hell is public compliance disclosure? Donna didn't answer immediately. She just stared for a beat. Let it hang. Then, it means if we don't resolve this privately and immediately, he's within legal right to submit a formal claim to the regulatory board with clause trigger protection. Everything becomes public record, including termination reasoning, severance denial, and our non-response. You could feel the room snap, like a rubber band stretched too far. Panic didn't scream, it whispered, then echoed. One exec mouthed something off camera. Another started texting under the table. HR shuffled papers like somehow the answer was buried deeper in the contract. He's bluffing, someone offered, voice brittle. He's not, Donna replied. He wrote it. That was the first time anyone used that word aloud. Wrote. As in, this wasn't some obscure addendum they'd missed. This wasn't external counsel failing to catch a loophole. This was Isaac's work. The man they'd fired over Slack on his vacation. The man who built the scaffolding under half their operations. The man they'd called too essential to promote, but not essential enough to respect. And now he'd become a weapon they didn't remember forging. Should we reach out? HR asked, voice soft. Donna didn't look up. We should have done that before you sent the termination notice. The CEO finally set his mug down, slowly, gently, as if any sudden movement might set off the next landmine. But the mine had already gone off. They just hadn't heard the echo yet. By noon, the walls were sweating. Not literally, of course, but the Slack threads sure were. Anyone know why legal's in the exec channel again? What clause is Donna screaming about? CEO just canceled his lunch. He never cancels lunch. Swear to God I heard him yell, "Who the hell signed that?" through the soundproof glass. The gossip moved faster than the facts, which only made it worse. Junior devs started digging through archived contracts. HR tried to quietly delete internal memos. Someone from finance accidentally CC'd an entire email chain to the wrong Rachel, and now a product manager knew more about Isaac's clause than the board did. It took under 24 hours for panic to reach outside the walls. An email hit the CEO's inbox from one of the angel investors. Urgent. Confirm there are no pending compliance disputes or unresolved contractual triggers related to terminated staff. That's all it took. Not a lawsuit, not a leak to the press, just one sentence from someone with enough capital to swing a guillotine, and suddenly everyone wanted to circle back. HR pinged Isaac first. Hey, Isaac, we'd really like to connect. Think there may have been some confusion. Let's talk this through. No reply. Then legal tried. Shorter, sharper. We'd like to discuss resolution. Are you available for a brief call today? Isaac didn't even open it. He didn't need to. The whole machine was now eating its own tail. The clause wasn't just a technicality. It was a loaded gun sitting in the middle of a very public room, and every second that passed, more people noticed it. The phrase, public compliance disclosure, was now being whispered in circles it was never supposed to reach. Clients, vendors, even the local paper's business desk had started sniffing around after a recruiter dropped a vague comment on LinkedIn. Meanwhile, Isaac was exactly where they left him, unplugged, unbothered, and about 4 feet from the ocean with a paperback and a bottle of cold Topo Chico. His phone lit up with pings, but he didn't swipe. Didn't scroll. Just glanced at the names, nodded to himself, and slid the phone back into the folded towel beside him. He wasn't rushing, wasn't retaliating. That's what they didn't understand. He'd already pulled the pin. All he had to do now was wait for gravity. 3 days after Isaac's silent exodus, the board convened a closed-door meeting that wasn't on any calendar. Phones confiscated, assistants barred. Everyone was told to come armed with facts and iron stomachs. Because someone finally asked the question that should have been asked, the second HR pulled the trigger. Did we break federal leave law? Legal didn't spin it. Couldn't. Donna, the general counsel, looked like she hadn't slept since Tuesday. She walked to the front of the boardroom and didn't even bother with a slide deck. Just held up a hard copy of Isaac's contract and pointed to a line highlighted in yellow. This clause is enforceable under both internal policy and federal protected leave standards. He was terminated while on active approved vacation. There is no ambiguity. Silence. One of the directors exhaled so loudly it echoed. The VP of HR tried to interject, but Donna cut her off with a single line. Your department drafted the termination letter. You own this. And that draft? It wasn't buried. It had already been leaked. Someone, no one would admit who, had screenshotted the original message HR sent to Isaac. The one that read, in plain, weaponized Helvetica, due to your refusal to support active projects during your current leave, your role has been deemed non-compliant and is therefore subject to immediate termination. No lawyer had scrubbed that one. No soft language. Just a digital smoking gun now floating through back channels like a cursed object. By that afternoon, the board had brought in an outside investigator, former federal compliance officer, now a fixer for companies with too many NDAs and not enough foresight. Her first act was to request Isaac's full employment history, all internal comms, and, crucially, the Slack logs from the day of his termination. HR tried to delay. She gave them 1 hour. No one argued again. Behind the scenes, Donna and her team were already running damage control with whispered phrases like pre-litigation mitigation and privileged context strategy, which is legal speak for, we screwed up and we better pay fast before this becomes Exhibit A. When the CEO finally emerged from the review session, he looked like someone had stolen his birth certificate. He didn't speak. Just walked straight to his office and closed the door, leaving behind the settlement packet Donna had printed. It wasn't spite. Not even rage. It was surgical. Isaac hadn't raised his voice, hadn't sent a single demand. All he did was sit still and let the machine trip over the wire he'd laid 3 years ago. 1 clause, 1 signature, 1 clean shot through the heart of their plausible deniability. The letter came by courier. Not FedEx, not USPS, a private delivery service. Same kind they use when contracts were headed to the SEC or settlement checks were walking into 7 figures. The envelope was thick, embossed with the Altium Core logo like it still meant something, sealed with a neat circle of red wax that was trying way too hard to feel ceremonial. Isaac opened it with a butter knife. Inside, an official HR letterhead, notarized severance agreement, payment breakdown, and a signed acknowledgement that his termination had occurred in violation of internal and federal leave protections. They didn't even try to bury the language. Legal had scrubbed out the euphemisms and left it raw. It read like a confession dressed up in corporate font. The numbers? Not just restored, multiplied. The original payout had tripled under Clause 7D's multiplier. They even added a line item for estimated legal indemnity benefit, a figure Donna had once joked would only ever trigger in theory. At the bottom of the letter, scrawled in black pen, something separate from the signatures, was a single line in the CEO's handwriting. I was told it was standard. I'm sorry. Isaac stared at that for a while. Not angry, not amused, just quiet, like watching a tree fall in the distance years after the first crack in the bark. He didn't write back, not for hours. But when he did, his email was as cold and surgical as the clause that undid them. Subject, Clause 7D, body, thank you. I accept payment as acknowledgement of clause enforcement. No further correspondence is required. No signature, no pleasantries, just the weight of precision doing its job. 2 weeks later, on an investor Q&A livestream buried deep in Altium Core's website, the CEO, looking thinner, grayer, rehearsed, stumbled through a response to a question about leadership changes. He ended with a line clearly written by legal but delivered with the dead eyes of a man still cleaning shrapnel out of his inbox. "We've revised all our exit protocols." He didn't name Isaac, didn't need to. By then, the ripple had already become doctrine. Other departments were auditing their contracts. Startups were asking who wrote Altium Core's Severance framework. HR consultants were scrubbing their old templates like they'd been infected. And Isaac? He wasn't watching. The money cleared. The clause held. And the only thing he added to his calendar that day was a note in his planner that simply read, "Final balance restored." The boardroom was cold. Not from the temperature, someone had tried adjusting the thermostat 3 times, but from the weight pressing down on the room like a final judgment. No one dared speak as Donna, the general counsel, sat back in her chair and read the clause one more time. Slowly, this time, like a eulogy. Termination during protected leave triggers maximum severance multiplier plus legal indemnity and public compliance disclosure. Her voice didn't shake, but the silence afterward did. The CFO's intern looked like he might throw up. The director of people had both hands folded so tightly they were white. Even the VP of Ops, the same smug genius who once joked Isaac would never leave because he probably duct-taped himself to the building, was staring at the floor like it might swallow him. And the CEO? He was holding a ceramic mug in both hands, barely sipping as if the warmth could tether him to something rational. But as Donna finished the clause, something in his grip slipped. The mug fell, cracked on the polished floor in 2 dull, lifeless pieces. No one moved to clean it up. Outside the call, the rest of the company was quiet too. HR had locked down their Slack threads. Legal had disabled editing rights on shared drives. People were tiptoeing like the walls could listen. And Isaac? He was sitting barefoot on a quiet stretch of beach, nowhere fancy, just sand and sky and salt. The tide came in slow and indifferent. A seagull, bold and unbothered, hopped onto his towel and stole half his sandwich before he could swat it away. He didn't care, just laughed, shook his head, and leaned back into the sun. His phone buzzed. Once. A name popped up on the screen, Claire from finance. They hadn't spoken since the holiday party 2 years ago when she cornered him with questions about her stock options. Her message was short. "They rewrote every severance clause today. Yours caused it." He read it twice, then locked the phone and placed it face down in the sand. He didn't need to respond. Didn't need to gloat. There would be no tell-all Medium post, no revenge podcast, no thinly veiled LinkedIn rant. Because this wasn't vengeance, it was alignment. They had tried to erase him quietly, efficiently, like he was just another footnote in a spreadsheet, and all he'd done was leave them with their own words, their own policy, their own weapon. The seagull shrieked once before taking off, crumbs falling like confetti in the wind. Isaac watched it go, and then, with a breath so quiet it might have been mistaken for peace, he whispered, "I didn't sue, I didn't scream, I just let their own rules speak louder than I ever could."